Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming, guys. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching us on YouTube, on Rumble, and on another platform called Rockfin. I'm joined today by a very special guest, Andrii Telizhenko. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, sir? First of all, I hope I'm
Yes.
not butchering your name.
No, I think it's good. Thank you.
That it's great to have you. Usually, when I'm a guest on other channels, YouTube channels, or on TV channels, they butcher my name, Kevork Almassian. That's why I would like to ask, because that would be really nice to pronounce your name correctly. You are a former Ukrainian official diplomat and a whistleblower. You are sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department and the Ukrainian government for, quote, allegedly engaging in foreign influence in a U.S. election. On your X account, you say that you are unjustly and unlawfully being sanctioned by these both governments. Could you share a little bit your story? Why do you think you were sanctioned to begin with? And what type of information you leaked as a whistleblower that you think crossed the line for the US and the Ukrainian government to come after you in a way that threatens at least your financial independence in this case?
Thank you for having me on, first of all, on the show. It's a great honor. And I do hope that we can discuss all these topics right now because this is important. Not just the sanctions part, but because it all interacts with what is today's so-called democracy in America, in the Ukraine, and the Western world itself. I came out with the truth in 2017 on a political article about Ukraine's intervention and intervening in the U.S. elections and how it backfired on them because basically Ukraine worked for Hillary Clinton and they asked me to be part of that scheme. I denied. I resigned from my position in the government and in the diplomatic corps in Washington, and I left back to Ukraine. And a couple of years later, I was reached out by Rudy Giuliani to talk about not only what happened in Ukraine, how Ukraine got involved in the U.S. elections of 2016 with the Black Ledger book, then getting Paul Manafort to prison. Basically, that's what Ukraine did. That was their role to try to destroy presidential candidate Donald Trump at that time. And then also because I worked for Blue Star Strategies, a company who coordinated Hunter Biden's role in the Ukraine and and basically his work with Burisma. That's what the company was involved in. And I came out, and because I got threatened by both of those sides because I came out with the truth. I had a great position before. I was an advisor to the first deputy prime minister of Ukraine, advisor to the prosecutor general of Ukraine, a diplomat in Washington. I had no problems with my life. I worked closely with the Democratic left-wing U.S. political side, and but then because I couldn't handle what they were doing, I couldn't stand what they were doing to Ukraine. I couldn't stand what they were getting involved with, getting my country to. It was a brink of war at that time. It was already Donbass being on fire, and the U.S. government pushing all the buttons in Ukraine. I said no to that. That's why I came out and said I will not continue this. And I came out with the truth, was to Rudy Giuliani, and then with the U.S. Senate. My evidence was used in the U.S. Senate report by Senator Johnson, Senator Grassley from Homeland Security Committee and from the Finance Committee of the United States Senate. 87 pages, 27 pages of my information, email communication with Blue Star Strategies on Hunter Biden and with the National Security Council of the Biden-Obama administration. And those emails were and are in that report, investigative report of the Senate. And that's why I got sanctioned, because I came out with the truth. I came out against the Biden family, crime family. I told that what they were doing wrong in Ukraine, how companies like Blue Star Strategies, a lobby firm which was coordinating Hunter Biden's work, was involved in that. And they were left off the hook. There were two investigations happening in America, one in the Federal Election Commission on the Ukrainian involvement in the U.S. elections, which then got closed after I got sanctioned, and the other one on Blue Star Strategies involvement without registering with FARA, and that's a law in America. And they basically backfired on them, but they signed the contract with FARA 7 years after working for Burisma, and they got off the hook after also I got sanctioned. So two criminal cases could have proceeded with my evidence, and they were just closed down because they shut me up in America. I cannot coordinate my work in America. I cannot come to America to testify, and I can speak to American journalists and press, but that's the only it. And today, and then afterwards, Ukraine sanctioned me. A year afterwards, by continuing to support this idea that America sanctioned me, that I'm a so-called Russian agent, because America sanctioned me for being a Russian agent and connecting me to a person I never met, Derkach. And can you imagine putting you on a list saying that you were working for a person that you never met or you just know? And I was telling everything and everywhere in the press where I come out. I said, I dare the Treasury Department come out and give the evidence what they have on me. There's nothing. Because I know that the Senate wrote a couple of letters to the Treasury Department. I know that American journalists on their behalf wrote a couple of letters requesting information on my persona. What I was sanctioned for is what evidence does this Treasury Department have on against Telizhenko. They had zero replies. Not only did American journalists get replies, the United States senators did not get a reply from the Treasury Department. So you can imagine what is happening. There's nothing. So it was a political process to shut a witness up, to shut a person who had an independent view, a person who did not support the leftist and Soros agenda in Ukraine, and who had something to deliver to the public, the truth, what happened, the corruption that was happening under the Obama-Biden administration, not only with Hunter Biden, but also with their involvement with getting Ukraine on board to help kick off the presidential race, one of the candidates at that time, President Donald Trump. So this is what I got sanctioned for. Ukraine just basically continue that route because they are obeying the orders from Washington. And 2 days before Zelensky's visit to Washington in 2021, and end of August, he sanctioned me also. And so that's why I'm filing. There's a court here. There's the Supreme Court of Ukraine. There's a motion there against Zelensky, and I'm the one who's filing it to get off those sanctions, because that's in Ukraine. You cannot sanction your own citizen. I'm a Ukrainian citizen, and you cannot sanction your own citizen by the Constitution. But he did. And there's not only me, there's thousands of people he signed an order of, which is illegal, just to pressure people. So this is the reality we live in, and I will continue my fight. I'm not going to give up, even though that doesn't only financial strain on me. I cannot open up a bank account. I cannot get a job abroad in the Western world, and I have to live in the situation like the support of my wife, my family. So this is the situation that there is. Even though I'm ready to work, I'm ready to do my job, I'm ready to do whatever I can to help my family, which I did for years. Now they blocked it from me, and they thought I'm going to give up, but I'm not.
I hope you're safe, because you're also on the Ukraine's kill list, which they reject the framing or the naming of it as a kill list. But I don't find any other explanation when you put the names of the people with details and sometimes with phone numbers and addresses on a public website. What are you calling for? In 2011, when the unrest started in Syria, and this was a covert CIA operation in Syria to topple Assad for geopolitical reasons, they also published a list of names of public figures in Syria who were in support of the government back then. So many of them were murdered and assassinated in Syria, and including the relatives and the sons and the daughters of influential public figures who had nothing to do with politics. A son of an actor, a son of a politician, a son of a member of parliament, for example, whoever they can, they came after them and they hunted them down. So I really take these things seriously, because there is a pattern that has been repeated in Libya, in Syria, and now in Ukraine. And I don't take such lists I don't underestimate, let's say, such lists, because you don't even need organized action against the names included in this list. You only need a lone wolf. Now, for example, in Western Europe, you have tens of thousands of refugees. Maybe someone is angry and mad with your political opinion or somebody else's political opinion, and then they act accordingly. And this is very dangerous. And this is where the media plays its destructive role. What the media or the mainstream media does, basically, they don't say go and harm Andrei in this case. You only need to demonize him and portray him in a very, very horrible way, and then inject some sentiments in this reportage. And then some people will just act accordingly. So in my opinion, this is a very dangerous what they do with you, with others. I don't want to share much of my story because this is about yourself, but I know 100%, I have the information that there were a list of names shared with the Trump administration in 2018 to sanction journalists and influencers basically on social media platforms under the title enabling the Syrian regime. So if you're against the mainstream narrative, then you are enabling a regime. So you have to be sanctioned. Of course, the Trump administration rejected that, thankfully so, in this case. But they could come after your livelihood. They can come after your security and your financial security in this case. And this is very dangerous, in my opinion. And I really hope that you're safe in this case.
Yes, the situation, I had to flee Ukraine because of those threats. When the war started, I was in Kiev. I was on air on one of the opposition TV channels the night before the war started, and talking about peace, that we should not lead to this. And the next day, the war started, and then I started getting threats on public television, having my name out there saying you should kill Telizhenko. I had got a couple of text messages from members of parliament of the Ukrainian government saying that I should be killed, and they put out my address and my name and a photograph on their social media, that if people find me, they should take me out, and that's still there on Facebook. Nobody's taking that down, and so I had to flee Ukraine at the beginning of the war, not because of the war, but because I was haunted to be shot and killed. I had three other friends who got killed in the apartment by the security service of Ukraine, by the SBU of Ukraine. They just came in and shot. Kalinchenko is one of them. He's a political expert. And I had another friend who just basically got kidnapped, and they put him in prison for a month and beat him up, just because he had a position to have peace in Ukraine. So this is what we're facing. I went through this. I'm still going through this. But as I said, the fight continues. They went after my country. They took my country in and made it a war zone. I'm talking about the Western elites, and I will not give up because I don't have no other else to go, just to get back to my country. Hopefully, it will be a safe one when I came back, because this is the only chance I have to continue my life and my future for my family, where I grew up. Ukraine, the not Nazi Ukraine, but the Ukraine that is a loving, peaceful country without the Nazism, without the hatred, without the regime that is going after churches. And that's what the Ukrainian I'm for that remembers its history, its past, and respects its future. So this is what I'm fighting for.
You know, I owe nothing but respect and love for the Ukrainian people, and I genuinely, in this case, when the Russian offensive started against Ukraine, I'm against the Russian incursion into Ukraine, and I am against wars. But at the same time, I always warned my friends or the connections that I have, the networks. I mean, I've been into Ukraine in 2015 in Donetsk. And I tried to explain that there is an attempt to turn Ukraine into a pawn in a big geopolitical conflict against Russia, and the Ukrainians are going to pay the big price. And I find out that many people, unfortunately, they were caught in the hype that this is going to be an easy job. They're going to defeat Russia in this case, but we're now hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men have perished. And I thought that this should be at least a waking call for many, many people around the world. But now we have the Ukrainian armed forces launching an incursion inside Russia, inside the Kursk Oblast. in your opinion, why the Ukrainian forces or the leadership of the Ukrainian forces decided now, we're speaking in August 2024, to wage an offensive inside Russia? What could they achieve from such an incursion inside Russia, in your opinion?
I'm not a military man, or I'm not more diplomatic foreign relations expert, but I did oversee the military and law enforcement of Ukraine when I worked in the government. And so I can, knowing the situation on the ground and knowing to people who are on the ground there, I can tell you that it's just a show, a big bloody show for the West. That Ukraine is still able to do something. Yeah, everybody already talked about it, but this is what from the beginning, this whole was a show. The first 3 months, there was a job for Ukraine to do on the situation of with the war in the with Russia. They needed to topple the government in Moscow because that was the main plan for this war. If the two Slavic nations fight, Ukraine and Russia, basically one nation, because all the relatives are live in Ukraine or Russia and in between. So people, it's always was one nation, one religion. So if they fight, and this Brzezinski wrote about this in 1985 to Reagan, Russia is going to be destroyed from within. So that was the main agenda of the war itself. Then, after that didn't happen, Russia's government stands strong today. They went on continuing this war to make money and try to pinch Russia every time there's a situation there and try to destroy it. Maybe something will happen. Maybe something will change in Russia. Maybe they will try to get an uprising of the people in Russia, but that didn't happen. So today, Ukraine, Zelensky's regime, Nazi regime, I cannot call it any other way, but and plus it's an illegal regime right now. Zelensky is not officially the president anymore. So they need to show the West to get more money, to get support of the West, of America, first of all, maybe the future president, that they can still do something and show that the Western money is going somewhere, that they're not losing. Because Ukraine is losing every day in Eastern Europe 3 to 4 villages. Every day in Eastern Europe. In South, they're also basically losing their positions in the Zaporizhzhia region. So what they do is, without having a front line of 1,240 kilometers, one of the largest front lines since World War II, and losing everywhere, all the positions, not going anywhere, but moving forward, they try to pinch Russia in a 15-kilometer range zone and into a 7 to 11 kilometers in depth zone of Kursk region. Because
I think we lost the connection with Andrei. I'm sure that he will come back now. And we were speaking about the incursion of the Ukrainian armed forces into the Russian territory. And I will just again show you the map of control over Ukraine, just for us to know what's happening in Ukraine and where the incursion happened, in this case, from the Ukrainian side. So this is the map of control over Ukraine. And as you can see, the map of control, these red oblasts, let's say, in Zaporizhzhia, in Donetsk, Lugansk, and also Sevastopol, those are the regions that have been occupied by the Russian forces. And then we have now heavy infighting happening here in northern Ukraine. And this blue-purple area is the area where the Ukrainian forces have conducted a military offensive, and they captured some of the villages in this area. And to my knowledge and the reports that I'm reading nowadays, the Russian forces are pushing the Ukrainian forces out of this area. And at the same time, and this is in my opinion a dangerous precedent, which is Belarus, is mobilizing its forces on the southern borders of the country against Ukraine. So if this escalation intensifies, we could possibly see an intervention from the Belarus side, which, in my opinion, would cross many red lines vis-a-vis NATO. Because if another foreign, let's say, army intervenes in this case, then we could see also NATO intervention. So Mr. Andrii is back. I was just explaining to them the area where the incursion happened. And I also said that the Belarus armed forces have mobilized their forces on the southern borders of Belarus. And this is dangerous escalation because it could also trigger direct NATO intervention. So whatever is happening nowadays there, it's not really playing in favor of re-establishing, let's say, stability and peace in Ukraine.
Yes, I apologize for the delay.
No worries.
Technology these days, they don't function properly. So the situation there, as I said, it's not the best one for Ukraine. The mainstream media is talking about, in Ukrainian media, that the whole Kursk region, almost they're in Kursk. No, that's not the situation. The act was they put in thousands of lives over there. Ukraine lost already more than 900,000 soldiers. With that, this is from information from NATO sources that I have and from the Ukrainian sources. It comes together to approximately 900,000 people dead on the Ukrainian side. And they right now losing everything in all the front lines of 1,200 kilometers of front lines approximately. They're trying to pinch this one region and this one zone. I said, a wide of 15 kilometers wide and up to 11 kilometers in depth. And that is it. It's just crazy. What are the consequences? What is Kiev and thinking about? They don't care about its own people. That is the problem. The result of this is going to be a bloody bath of Ukrainian lives in that area. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of Russian troops also leaving the front lines are dead, but we're seeing more Ukrainian lives are being wasted just to show the West and the mainstream media that Ukraine can attack Russia, that this is an insurgent of Russia, that there are German tanks on Russian soil. We see the headlines that American equipment is in Russia, killing Russians. And what is the end game of this? What will it lead? We have to understand what this insurgent of this territory will lead to. Because what happened is the Ukrainian army went in and then just spread out into the woods, into the villages, using people as shield. And why did it happen? Why did the situation was a possibility of that happening to come into the Russian territory? Was that Ukraine used the tactics what, for example, Israel is using against Gaza. They're just shooting everything down what they can. Civilians or non-civilians, they're coming in and shooting at everything they can. Russia doesn't do that in Ukraine. They're shooting especially military targets with missiles. These guys are at the hand shooting everything. What they did in Donbass was shooting everything down with civilians. They didn't care. And the same thing happening here today, shooting everything down, coming into the territory as an army, and just going through the front lines and doing whatever they need to do to get a show for the West. So this is, unfortunately, my view on this. I don't believe it's going to lead to anything. Today, Zelensky is on his last straw because there's no other way out for him than peace negotiations. But at this time, will Russia want peace negotiations after what happened in Kursk? Because we see the videos where you have civilian vehicles on the road, as the West showed us what happened in Israel, and after that, Israel got a green light from America and the West to go into Gaza. But these guys are doing the same thing with an official military of a country that the West is supporting. So they're basically supporting the killing of civilians, and everybody's quiet about this. This is what terrifies me. They turned my country, Ukraine, which is a beloved country by everybody, into a terrorist state, which is basically right now Mali's closing. It's the embassy of Ukraine in Mali is being closed there. In Niger, also the embassy of Ukraine is being closed because the government doesn't want to work with Ukraine anymore because it's supporting terrorist groups on the ground there. And Ukraine itself has become the government in Ukraine. The Zelensky government is turned into a Nazi terrorist state, going after civilians and using terrorist tactics. So this is what terrifies me. This is not the case of Ukraine. Ukraine is not. This is not the face of Ukraine also. And what the outcome will all this be is that Ukraine will not have peace. There's the last chance of a peace negotiation between Russia and Ukraine was on the table, and it ended with this so-called invasion of 11 kilometers in depth territory. It's not an invasion of a whole oblast or a whole region. It's just a small part where there's thousands of soldiers right now fighting between each other and dying just because somebody wanted to make and stay in power and make more money on this.
Andrii, you pointed your finger at Zelensky, that this is more of a desperate incursion inside Russian territory to show to the, let's say, Western governments and public that Ukraine can still continue fighting and they still need more, let's say, security aid packages in the future, regardless of the governments and the administrations. But there is also another argument in this case that some people say that this is not Zelensky's decision. And it's either some of the foreign powers, for example, in February, March 2022, it was Boris Johnson who sabotaged the peace treaty between the both sides, or there is another conspiracy theory in this case that they say this goes beyond national governments, that they are in the dark rooms. We have people, bankers in the military industrial complex. We have people that we don't know their names, and they're interested in escalation in Ukraine. They're not interested in peace, because I will still remember last week that Zelensky said that maybe we should negotiate for peace with Russia. And then the week after, we saw this incursion into the Russian territory, which really raises lots of questions, like who is in charge in this? And is there any outside forces pushing the Ukrainian armed forces to go into Russia? Those are serious questions, right?
Of course, it's all been coordinated from outside. But Zelensky is the one who is pushing the buttons in Ukraine. He could have said no. Yes, probably he would be killed after that by the West, but at least he would not be taking down the whole country with millions of lives. That's one thing. Second of all, this is coordinated by Zelensky, and he needs this for a show with his allies outside of Ukraine, because they also need this financing for Ukraine to continue and to show the world public and the governments outside that this is effective to bleed Russia in areas which it can be bled out from, like weak areas which they're trying to find. So it's needed by the people who are behind Zelensky also to have the money flow to continue, for them to stay in power until the U.S. presidential elections. As I said, it's about money and power, not only for Zelensky, but also for people who are behind him and who are people who are backing him up. The Biden administration today, with Kamala coming in, she might lead this way to show that their administration did not let Ukraine to lose this war. Then we have the British government, which is also continuing, the European government continuing the same course to show that they are effective in helping Ukraine, that they did not lose yet, that there's still air to breathe for the Ukrainian soldiers so they can continue to do their work. So it's, as I said, power and money throughout this whole infrastructure, of starting from Zelensky, ending with the end game who's outside, to show their public that this can still continue. So you're totally correct on this. And my case in this situation is what will be the end game, the continuation of this war? Yes, people, because they're going to make more money. The military industrial complex is going to make more money. Eisenhower warned about the military industrial complex in America, that if it takes power, then there's going to be no democracy in the United States. So this is what it took. The military industrial complex with the BlackRock took power, and now they basically control the whole policy-making process, not only in America, but the whole Western so-called world, Europe, etc. So this is, unfortunately, the situation which we are in. That Zelensky talked about peace last week. He never wanted peace. It was for him to talk peace, that to show an image that he tried to talk about peace in between Russia and Ukraine, because Putin was talking about peace. So he was given an order by his Western coordinators to talk about peace and to talk about peace, so he would not look bad in front of, like, Putin was talking about peace. So this was a PR move, and to show that before the Minister of Foreign Affairs go to China, that the Ukrainian government wants peace. They never wanted peace. They never want peace, because if they get peace, they're done. Starting from Zelensky, ending with the people abroad who are financing him and basically consulting him and own him, and those are foreign governments, the Anglo-Saxon movement, etc. So this is how crazy this is, and heartbreaking, for me as a Ukrainian to see that my country is not independent, it's not sovereign, it has a puppet regime which is in power, and it's all those men are being taken off the street to go and fight to put them into the meat grinder every day. And as I said, after this, I don't believe there's a peace possibility at all with Russia. Russia will not go for peace negotiations if there will not be a regime change in Kiev. And what I talked about and advised on American television just recently, and that before Trump even starts negotiating, if he wants a real peace deal in Ukraine, before any negotiations, he needs to give an order if he becomes a president, to let all the Soros, all the CIA agents, all those foreign advisors, all those regime supporters of the Soros who want war out of Ukraine, and then call Moscow, and then start talking about peace. If that doesn't happen, there won't be ever a peace. There's going to be sabotages throughout this route, and there won't be a possibility even for a chance of stopping this war at all, because these people are there. They were put there for the last 10 years to have this war. And this is the biggest grief on this. And Aaron Mate did a great article with me a couple of months ago, and how 10 years of U.S. destruction in Ukraine led from starting from the war in Donbass with the order of CIA Director Brennan, and then with today's war with the orders, as I said, for like Boris Johnson stopped the negotiations in Istanbul. This war could have just ended in Minsk. Ukraine could have had Donbass with an autonomy and lived a peaceful life, but no, it was led to war. Ukrainians were risen above to show that they are a higher nation than Russians, than people around Ukraine. You have Ukrainians coming to Europe saying that everybody owes them the payments they need, the refugees, and everything else. It's just terrible how propaganda penetrated regular people, normal people, to show that, put them higher up, and they believed it. This is what we're called Nazism. Why this government is a Nazi government, because they put Ukrainians higher above than anybody else. They're promoting people who collaborate with the Nazi regime on a government level, having their monuments put up around the country, and having officially military organizations working with the military of Ukraine, fighting for them from the Nazi groups like Kraken, SSLChina, etc. So this is just crazy what Ukraine has become.
You know, when you're a politician and you're in a position to take a strategic decision, for example, to go into confrontation with Russia, let's say, if you're a politician and you care about your own people, of course you have to make the calculations, the pros and cons, and you also have to put on the table all the options you have vis-a-vis your enemy or supposed enemy, and you have to also draw strategies. First of all, how you're going to engage in acts of hostilities, and then what's the exit strategy. I don't see for Ukraine an exit strategy in this case, which raises the question, like, is Zelensky a collaborator or not? Because if he was really, he represents the Ukrainian interest, then he has to at some point agree to sit on a negotiation table and strike a peace treaty with his neighbor. And Russia is not like a foreign power or foreign colonial power which was implanted there. Russia exists there for thousands of years. Therefore, you have to coexist somehow at the end of the day, or these hostilities will continue and the onslaught will continue and tens of thousands more will die. So I don't really see that Ukraine has an exit strategy. And this brings me to the conclusion that it's not Zelensky here who's really in charge of this war, but rather it's Ukraine being used against Russia in this case. And it's very sad to see, because the only way out of this probably is regime change. It's either regime change in Russia or it's regime change in Ukraine. So we really reached to a dead end in this case. And in my all realistic and objective and rational mind, I don't see that a regime change possible in Moscow, but it is possible in Ukraine in this case, just if we check the balance of power between both sides. And from here, we move to what happened in Zaporizhzhia. First of all, I would like to ask you, how do you, like, what happened there? First of all, Russia accuses Ukraine of using a drone to bomb the Zaporizhzhia power plant, and the Ukrainians say the Russians attacked it. In your opinion, who benefits from such an attack, and on this exact timing?
If we look into the propaganda from Kiev from the start of Donbass war in 2014, Kiev always talked about how Donbass was bombing itself, how the people of Donbass and Russia was bombing its own people to show that it's Ukraine, even though there were military groups and the Ukrainian military out there bombing it, because I personally know that orders were given by the Minister of Defense to do that on the Ukrainian side. So today we see the same story, that Russia is bombing itself. Russia is bombing its own nuclear plant that it took over recently. And so this is the narrative continues, which is already crazy because it's not funny anymore to even to listen to such thing. Ukraine has 4 more nuclear plants. None of them are being bombed by Russia, even though Russia has a possibility to do that with hypersonic missiles and missiles, etc. It doesn't do that at all. And with drones, it doesn't do that. So why only Zaporizhzhia, which Ukraine is trying to take back? Because Ukraine is the one that's trying to go and basically have to sabotage this process today, and to have a nuclear situation where the West will have to intervene and say that Russia was involved in this, and because it's a nuclear power plant and it's nuclear terrorism, the West will have to try to intervene. That's what Zelensky's end game is. He needs the West to come in with boots on the ground to Ukraine, because there's nobody to fight in Ukraine anymore. The men who are being drafted to fight, they have no, their training is 2 weeks. Most of them didn't hold a weapon in their life at all. Most of them are not qualified. A lot of them are over 60 years or 50 years old, over 50, over 40. The younger ones are weak, and they cannot fight at all. So this is the situation what it is today with the Zelensky's army. So he needs provocation, not for himself, but also the West needs a possibility to come into Ukraine, as we talked about. I'm just focusing with Zelensky. For me, as I focus on him, I understand that he's not a sovereign or independent player, that people already understood that there are people behind him. So that's why I don't even try to explain that all the time. That there's puppets. He's the puppet. He sold off to the British in 2019 in June when he came to London, etc. So that story is known or understood by people around the globe, that he's not independent. So then the West needs a way out of this in Ukraine, the way out to continue this war with boots on the ground from NATO and boots on the ground from the United States, and having a situation within a nuclear power plant, as Zaporizhzhia saying that it was Russia, and we told you all about it. That's why MAGATE is not giving an answer. Who was the one who shot that drone to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant? Because Russia is asking the international organization MAGATE to give an answer on who is responsible of doing that, and they're not answering the direct question. Which is also interesting, because who controls all these UN organizations? The United States, mostly, because they're financed and their headquarters are the UN's headquarters are located in New York. So this is why we see the situation today. People are drawn into this propaganda saying that Russians are shooting down their own nuclear power plant. And even though there's 4 more in Ukraine, they're not shooting those down. They're only shooting this one they control, which is it's total nonsense if you think about it logically, without even going into depth. Who do you support or who you don't support? Just think logically. Well, is there a possibility of having that happen? No, it's not. By the Russian side, it's only today's Kiev's regime is doing this by the orders of people who control that regime outside of Ukraine.
Before I go to the last question, I would just like to remind the viewers, the hundreds of them watching us now live, and then it would be with thousands of them, that the X account of Andrii is in the description below. Guys, and Andrii, is there any other platform that you would like for the viewers to follow your work?
I do Facebook also. I'm on Facebook, and I do mostly in Russian on Facebook, and on X I do it in English. So I try to have 2 audiences, and I also have Telegram, but it's still, I was blocked on X and on Telegram and on Facebook, so I had a lot of followers of them. Like I had twice the followers on X and 3 times the followers on Telegram and Facebook. But then the Ukrainian government in the U.S. while the elections, they blocked me, so I lost a lot of people, unfortunately.
I'm
But
not.
now I'm back.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not shocked at all that they blocked you. And this is the modern way of sending people to jail, basically. They don't really send you to the physical jail. They just deplatform you. They close your bank accounts. So it's like the modern way of oppressing people and shutting their mouths up, or their pens in this case. One of our followers say that Kevork's channel is suppressed by YouTube at the behest of the German government. I mean, I don't know if the German government has taken an action against me with YouTube, but I do know that they have taken an action against myself, at least to say, like they tried to deport me from Germany for having a YouTube channel and trying to educate people. So probably they have also sent something to YouTube. I don't know. I don't have an information about that, but they do such things, and they share their concerns with these platforms to suppress some of these platforms, because the number of the subscribers you have, like I have now 76,000 subscribers, and compared to the number of people watch the videos, it's not symmetrical. Like it doesn't make any sense. And many people tell me they don't find my videos unless they really search for the channel and they go and check video by video to see, because it's not on their timeline. Anyways, I will just draw a parallel correlation between two different conflicts, and I would like to hear your opinion. And this is the last question for you. There is a serious escalation in Ukraine at the moment. We have this Zaporizhzhia power plant has been hit by a drone. And this is also, and I agree with you, that this could lead, if there was any sort of nuclear terrorism, for the intervention of NATO on the side of Ukraine against Russia. So this is first. The second, we're watching nowadays an ongoing slaughterhouse in the Gaza Strip, right? Thousands of people are dying, and 17,000 children have been killed by the Israeli forces. There is an argument that says that Israel is grooming the global populace to accept a horrific loss of life in Gaza in order to prepare this public for a nuclear attack on Iran at a later stage. So when the people accept or normalize in their mind that tens of thousands of people just died and been slaughtered in the Gaza Strip, then 100,000 could also get slaughtered in Iran if a tactical nuclear bomb is being dropped on Iran in an act of self-defense, right? So I see, from my point of view, that Israel is trying to drag the United States into a wider regional war in the Middle East. And at the same time, I see that Ukraine is trying to drag the United States and NATO into a global war with Russia in the gate of Ukraine. So from both sides, you see that there is a consistent attempt to drag the United States into direct confrontation, one with Russia and two with Iran. Do you see that there is a correlation between these two conflicts, like I explained?
Yes, there is, because I think the United States is coordinating both of those conflicts in Israel and in Ukraine. And for Israel, why that conflict is needed, if they started to lose the situation in Ukraine, they will have another conflict they will have to show the public they're winning in, at least. That's, I think, a situation that there is on the table, even though I don't believe that the United States will leave Ukraine that easily. It's their only chance to bite Russia. And because if they lose today, they're going to lose in the next 100 years to have this possibility to be by the border of Russia, fight Russia, and try to destroy it from within. And so this is so they're going to fight in Ukraine until the last Ukrainian, I believe, and then they're going to have foreign soldiers come in and use Ukraine territory to fight that bloody war, proxy war with Russia. So Israel is at the same time is the other way out, just in case if something happens in Ukraine, that Russia is going to come in and full force, basically topple the regime in Kiev, and then they're going to be regime changes. People, because most of the Ukrainians want peace, they will come into the Israeli-Iranian conflict and continue that conflict. That's one thing. It's if we put it simple in simple terms. But in other terms, there's a lot of financing of the Jewish community in Washington, and to fight for Israel, and they're financing different political candidates with huge amounts of money, and they believe they need to continue this war, so Israel can basically take in more land. This war is for Israel to basically take that land of Gaza and get the Palestinians out, and that unfortunately, and then continue and basically put Iran in its place, or try to put Iran in its place, even though I don't believe also Israel has the possibility to fight a war between Iran and all those other Arab nations against itself, even with the help of the United States. That's going to be total also World War III scenario, end of civilization, if you start using nuclear warheads, even tactical ones. And the horrific death toll in Israel and Palestinian war, that the Gaza, more than 40,000 people, grown, children are separate, it's up to 18,000, as you said, something 18,000, and 40,000 men and women have died. And this is by the number of the United Nations. Russia announced that number just a week ago in the United Nations Security Council. So that's the horrific death toll, what is right now of area. And that's, I believe that's a genocide over and it's just terrifying how Israel is getting off the hook on this, and how the Western elites are using these conflicts to continue their fight against the governments they don't like. Iran is being independent; they don't like it, they hate it, they want a war with it. Russia don't like, they hate it because it's independent. They want a war with it. They want to topple that government. Uh, my big example is even Afghanistan. You know, I don't support the government there, but I see that after America leaving Afghanistan, it became a normal country with uh, friendship and diplomacy with countries around itself, China, Pakistan, Turkmenistan, Russia, and zero terrorist actions there. People are living peacefully. The opium is being destroyed, and the country became sovereign and independent after America left. So you have American intervening and helping Israel. We have a bloodbath and a genocide of Palestinians. America helping to fight Ukraine for democracy, so-called democracy. More than 900,000 Ukrainian soldiers dead, compared to Russians around 150,000 approximate. So this is an example of Western American intervention in the world. And then you have countries like Afghanistan, which is now becoming a peaceful, sovereign country. So this is just crazy, and I'm just hope that it doesn't continue, because, as I said, it all leads to money, and money being made in wars. And they don't; these people in the Western world, they believe that they're both are so powerful that they continue to fight this war. Nobody will understand the truth. Anybody who talks about the truth will be destroyed, and they can continue doing whatever they want, and even lead to a nuclear destruction between Israel and Iran, which is going to lead to destruction of both countries totally, and the area will be unlivable for thousands of years. And what will happen to the rest of the world afterwards, that's also only God knows. So this situation here is very, there's no way out of this, only a diplomatic way out. And after even having what happened to Palestine and Israel, somebody needs to have the guts in even Russia and China to show and say somebody has to take responsibility for the deaths of those people. And there's, because that's just, we're talking not about military, we're talking about civilians. I lived in Egypt for 2 years. I know the Arab world pretty well, and so I know how people feel about each other there. There are some groups that are more extremist. There are terrorist groups, yes, but there are normal people living there, and these normal people are the ones who are now suffering in Palestine. And as I said, the same in Ukraine, but that's soldiers. But here in Palestine, we're talking about a war, and there's a war happening and people dying, but nobody's talking about a genocide from Israel. But there's the Russians getting tactical hits on Ukrainian military bases around Ukraine, and where even the Ukrainian military is using shopping malls, etc., tactically hitting those right away, and without hardly any civilians killed. Everybody's talking about a genocide from the Russian Federation towards Ukraine, even though it warned for 20 years. Russia asked Ukraine not to join NATO and have the West not to continue this path. Today, the world is trying to show that the Western world is trying to show that things black is white, white is black, but that's not the case. We understand more and more, uh, find out what is really happening in Israel and Palestine and Ukraine and Russia.
Actually, it's a disgusting hypocrisy when you compare what's happening in these two countries, and this doesn't only accelerate the shift to a multipolar world on a political and economic and financial levels, but also on a popular level. The ordinary people are convinced nowadays that this so-called rules-based order is no longer serving the interests of the people, like their own people in the United States, in the UK, in Germany, in France, etc. But worst is working against the interest and the livelihood of the majority of the world. So we can see that the people are also emboldened in resisting the agenda, let's say, of the unipolar world, and they're pushing for a multipolar world. And I truly believe that that would be the best formula for the majority of the people, not the best formula for this few elite, few families, few bankers, few clans, let's say, in the military industrial complex, waging these wars for the benefit of their own pockets, while we, the ordinary people, are getting smashed. I'm from Syria, and my country has been destroyed because of this war, regime change wars, and they're now strangling the people with the sanctions. So, of course, we would like to speak up against this and speak against them, and we would like them to act in a rational and a humane way. When they act in a rational and humane way, then I truly believe that most of the people are ready to forget what happened in the past, just for them to continue at least breathing in a normal way, and not to get strangled by either wars or sanctions or different types of monopolies. Andrii, thank you so much for coming to the show. I really appreciate that you dedicated this time for me and for the audience of Syriana Analysis. This is also a learning journey for myself. I loved listening to your story, personal story, and also your opinion on what's happening in Ukraine, in your country. I wish peace and stability for your country, and most importantly, I wish that not a single more Ukrainian would die in this conflict, although this is a wishful thinking, and I know that it's a really dire situation there. And when we speak about these cases, and why I do this podcast and this conversation, so that other people in other regions wouldn't fall in a similar trap, one of which is I believe that it's going to happen in Armenia. They're preparing Armenia to become another pawn this time against Russia and against Iran. And I hope that the Armenians would wake up. Myself, I'm an ethnic Armenian. I've been warning against it, and I hope I am wrong in this case. Andrii, thank you so much again for coming to the show.
Thank you very much, Kevork. I do hope for peace, and your words will come true, and Syria will become a peaceful country back again. It's a beautiful country from what I heard, and a lot of history there. And I hope it will be back where people can travel there, visit, and have a peaceful life, and Syrians will live peacefully. And I hope that there won't be any more conflicts, like we talked about, mentioned Armenia and everything else. So peace, and I hope people will pray for peace and be more kind to each other. Then things might start changing a bit more.
God willing. Thank you so much. And guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's live streaming. I appreciate you all. Before leaving this live streaming, I would appreciate if you hit the like button. It helps me with the algorithm of YouTube and with the suppression. And if you like to support this independent work, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And I will see you tomorrow, Tuesday, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. Peace be upon you, upon your families.